Trying to breathe your symptoms away reinforces the problem, telling your brain, I can't handle this fear, and I certainly can't handle these sensations. Knowledge can make you feel like you are doing something when you actually aren't. I've also seen example after example of people recovering without doing a single exercise. You can learn from my mistakes so that you can recover faster from chronic symptoms. Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Yonit Arthur. I'm an audiologist and coach. You're on the Steady Coach. And today I'm going to be talking about what I've gotten wrong about recovery over the years and how you can learn from my mistakes so that you can recover faster from chronic dizziness, PPPD, MdDS, vestibular migraine, visual symptoms, and other chronic symptoms. My channel's been around for a few years, and I think it's the sign of a good practitioner to evolve, and I certainly have. And part of that is thanks to great mentors, lots of training, but mostly because of experience that I've gained over the last 5 or 6 years since I started this channel from working with people who are dealing with symptoms just like yours. So, we're going to talk about 6 things that I've gotten wrong. And for each, I'm going to explain what I've gotten wrong, how I currently think about it, and most importantly, what each of these mean for you and your recovery from chronic dizziness and other symptoms. The first thing that I got wrong was the importance of breathing and regulation. Back when I started, I used to spend a ton of time teaching people breathing techniques and how to regulate themselves. And I have to admit that the word regulate now sort of makes me cringe, and I'm going to explain why in a moment. But my most popular video here on YouTube is a video about how to heal from PPPD first steps. And in that video, I teach you how to use parasympathetic breathing after having symptoms triggered to try to reduce the danger signal that your body has associated with the symptoms and triggers. And I'm on the right track in this video. I correctly identified that the fight or flight response is being triggered by sensations and by triggers. It makes sense too to then use physiologic cues to tell yourself that you're safe. You'll hear people mention the value of this technique in the success stories, and a lot of you out there have used it with a lot of success. But I've come to learn that recovery doesn't happen from desperately trying to blow your symptoms away using a certain kind of breathing. Trying to breathe your way through some of the symptoms you're experiencing is like trying to drink out of a fire hose. But also, when you're trying to breathe your symptoms away, you're actually sort of reinforcing the problem because what you're doing is telling your brain, I can't handle this vigilance. I can't handle this fear. I can't handle this anxiety. And I certainly can't handle these sensations. So now the way I think about it is actual recovery happens when you learn to be dysregulated well. What I mean by that is when you learn how to not fight fear. For many of you, fear of fear and anxiety is actually the problem, not the fear itself. So when you stop trying to fight your fear with various breathing and regulation tools, the levels of fear actually come down and the sensations end up coming down as well. Okay, so what does this mean for your recovery? For many of you, you're going to find those practices very helpful. And I think it makes sense for many of you to start by trying to use those kinds of practices. Slow exhales, controlled breathing, whatever other regulation techniques that you've found on YouTube or elsewhere that have helped you, that's totally fine. If it helps you contain the sensations, if it helps you reduce the fear and the fear stays down, great. That means it's working and you should absolutely be using these practices. But when you find it's not working, that's what I'm always asking people. Is it working? Great. If you find that it's not working, then we need to try a different tactic. I'm always asking people that question when they ask, should I be doing this or should I be doing that? I ask, is it working? And they say, actually, no, it's making my fear and symptoms worse. Well, if that's the case, if it's not working, it's not working. Don't do it. Pick something else. Now, a caveat on the word working. Sometimes breathing is slow, meaning when you start using something like parasympathetic breathing and regulation practices, your body doesn't just immediately say, oh, okay, my bad, everything's fine, especially when you're faced with really scary sensations. So it may be that you're going to need to try it for a few weeks to see what changes first. But if you notice that fear is going up, and you feel worse than when you started, it may be that you're fighting your fear rather than letting it be there. And that means we need to switch tactics. So, the bottom line here is if you've tried breathing and trying to regulate yourself, and that doesn't seem to be taking hold, that means your nervous system is taking that intervention as a threat. So you don't want to do them and you want to switch to something else. And for those of you who find yourself in this position, I have some videos on how to let symptoms happen and what to do with fear in particular. I will link to those in the video description. Check those out. So, the second thing that I got wrong, more information is always better. I mean, I have a YouTube channel. Obviously, I think education is tremendously important, and it really is the most important piece for many people. And I am convinced it has saved lives. For those of you who didn't know your symptoms were reversible and who didn't know what to do, just having education has saved many lives. But I also see some of you guys getting stuck in a paradigm that I affectionately call knowledge hamstering. You know how hamsters just run and run and run on a wheel, but then don't get anywhere? So, some people, I think, watch my YouTube videos and think if I just know a little bit more, then I'll be able to recover better. But then they don't end up actually putting things in practice and they think they're doing something by learning, but in fact, what they're doing is delaying doing anything. Knowledge can even become a barrier to recovery because it can increase attention on symptoms. And as I said, it can make you feel like you are doing something when you actually aren't. So, what does this mean for your recovery? Ask yourself, do I need more information or do I need to actually apply the information that I've already learned? Challenge yourself to write down one takeaway from each video and spend time putting it into practice. I also suggest, and this is why I'm the worst YouTuber on the planet, that you limit the time you spend consuming information. It's okay to watch videos, especially when you're in the early knowledge gathering stage, but do not let it become a barrier to you actually doing and practicing the things you need to do to get better. Before we go on to the next one, and speaking of the YouTube channel, if this is your first video, welcome, and please be sure to hit the subscribe button. I put out useful content like this every week, so I don't turn you into a knowledge hamster. Let's go on. Here's the third thing that I got wrong. Exercises are always useful and necessary. So I'm trained as an audiologist and I'm trained in vestibular therapy. I'm also trained as a strength coach, and exercise and vestibular therapy are really well supported in research. And some of these things are in the clinical guidelines for many of the diagnoses that you have, like PPPD and vestibular migraine. But what's happened over the years is that as I've worked with clients and talked to many other people with these conditions, I see people doing these extreme exercise regimens and continuing when nothing is changing, or even just adding more and more and more, becoming obsessed with these routines despite nothing changing about the symptoms. I've also, over the years, seen example after example of people recovering from chronic dizziness and other symptoms without doing a single exercise. So, what's happened is that over the years, I've started to see steadiness as something that you don't need to wire your brain to do, or a skill you have to relearn when you have a neural circuit issue. I've come to see it as something that the brain can naturally restore when you get out of its way. Dizziness and sensory overwhelm are expensive, and your brain really does want to filter all this nonsense information out so you can feel steady or not overwhelmed. If it's not doing it, your brain doesn't think it's safe to do so. So, our job is to help it see that it is. So, what does this mean for you? Your brain knows how to rewire as long as it is exposed to the triggers and symptoms themselves. So, for those of you with dizziness, if you have movement in your life, if you garden, if you turn your head, if you bend over, if you do regular exercise, if you move at multiple speeds throughout the day, that is plenty of stimulation to give your brain the information it needs to rewire. For those of you with visual symptoms, being in different visual environments, tracking with your eyes, with different backgrounds at different speeds also gives your brain plenty of stimulation. For those of you with sound related symptoms, hearing sound and learning that sound is actually a safe thing also gives your brain plenty of stimulation. So, I think people can consider a regimen of specific exercises for their symptoms as long as it's not something that they're just going to keep doing forever if the symptoms don't improve. And also, if the symptoms aren't triggered or affected by the exercises or the exposures themselves, then we're not changing anything. So for dizziness, if it's not making you dizzy or it's not making your dizziness improve, then why are we still doing them? And over the long run, of course, initially for the first few weeks, it can make you feel worse. I'm talking over 3 months or longer. For sound related symptoms, it means that exposures should make you uncomfortable, or if you are dealing with tinnitus, that having a masking sound should let you relate to the tinnitus differently. If that's not happening, then you may not need specific sound generators or specific special exposure sounds. The fourth thing that I got wrong was I thought you should validate all feelings and do emotional work as part of your recovery. So many prominent voices in the neural circuit field talk about emotions and emotional repression. So I fell in line. And there are entire programs out there devoted to feeling your feelings, processing emotions, journaling about your feelings, uncovering your hidden emotions, releasing trauma, etc. And yes, emotions are physical phenomena, and they absolutely affect your brain's sense of threat. And feeling emotions is important because emotions are data that point you to your needs. But oddly enough, and I think I didn't make this clear enough in my early work, most people aren't talking about the crucial second step, which is that emotions don't just come from nowhere. Emotions very often come from beliefs and stories. So, a second step that's really important is to deconstruct beliefs and stories that cause emotions. And these are not just thoughts, to be clear, although thoughts can certainly cause emotions too. They can also be deeply held beliefs that you're not aware of. So, just a quick example of why I think this is important. Okay, say you're super angry at a family member and you've learned to express your anger and stand up for yourself. That's kind of that first phase of emotional awareness and expression. Awesome. Now what? Do we just not talk to them anymore? Does this mean that you should seek greener pastures? Does it mean that you should just become more confrontational? And sometimes it is that simple. You just need to learn to stand up for yourself more. Maybe you've been a people pleaser your whole life. But often you're angry because you have beliefs that are making you angry. For example, my family members should be more emotionally available to me. Or when people aren't emotionally available, that makes me feel abandoned and alone. So I lash out. I've got more videos coming about topics like this soon, specifically about contracts or beliefs that lead you to have emotions. So we're going to get into this more. But knowing these beliefs often reveals that the feeling is neither true nor useful. So it's not correct to just validate feelings and think something is going to change. So, what does this mean for you? You should still feel your feelings. I stand by that 100%. But you should never automatically believe that they reflect objective truth about reality. In fact, you should always assume the opposite, that feelings reflect your appraisal of reality, and chances are it's not objectively true. So, what this looks like is validate and honor your feelings, but do not believe your stories and question them. Okay, fifth thing that I got wrong, just think differently. So, for many years as a clinical audiologist, I was taught and practiced principles of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. And actually, many of the videos here on my channel use these principles. And they are tremendously helpful. And honestly, many of you have recovered just using those kinds of principles, thinking differently. But what I found is that often people who watch my videos, like you, know you're being irrational. Yonit, I know I shouldn't be scared and frustrated, but I just can't help it. I know I shouldn't be so hard on myself, but I can't stop. I know I need to stop procrastinating and watching these videos and put things into practice, but I just cannot bring myself to do it. I swear I want to, and I want to recover. I believe you. I believe you. You are not flawed when you can't argue your way out of your own thoughts. Dizziness and symptoms aren't logical processes because otherwise you would just watch one video and say, oh, logically, this makes sense. Cool. Bye, dizziness. And it would just go away. We need to get into the body and other experiences that aren't logical to recover. What does this mean for you practically? It means that you need to experience safety, not just think about it. So we have a practice called somatic tracking, which is a time when you notice your symptoms and respond to them more neutrally or with curiosity or whatever. There are lots of options. I'll put some of those in the video description. But when you experience that you actually do not die or do not have your world fall apart when you feel feelings or feel sensations, you experience that there is actually safety present. And furthermore, you need to experience progress, not just rationalize it. So many of you get stuck because you're focused on tracking how well your symptoms are doing at a given time. And look, none of you would be watching this video if that weren't important to you. You would just have skipped this and watched cute cats or something. But we can't track symptoms on a daily, weekly basis as our outcome measure. We have to focus on the process because process goals give you lived experience that you are actually making progress, and they are not dependent on something that is not directly in your control. They are dependent on things you can control. I have videos on process goals. I'll put those in the video description as well, and watch for more content on this too. Okay, last thing I'm going to cover in this video that I got wrong about recovery is that I used to think you'll just know what to do when you feel better emotionally. And I think this is my spiciest take of this whole video because I've always believed, and I still believe, in your system's wisdom and your capacity to develop autonomy and agency and know what to do. So I used to think of recovery as sort of a constraint release process, meaning once I help you work through your limiting beliefs and feelings, you'll know what to do next. And to be fair, that actually is the case for many people, as you'll hear about in the recovery stories. But no, I no longer agree with this take. And here's why. I've come to see deep knowing and actually doing as sort of a feedback loop. If you do knowing without doing, you don't get anywhere. And if you do doing without knowing, you don't get anywhere either. This is why I think we need to work on mindset and stress bucket and behavioral change all at the same time. And I think some of you benefit from actual training on how to start growing as people and how to actually put these changes into practice. So, what does this mean for you? Inner work is only part of the equation for recovery for many people. You need to learn how to apply it. And what I mean by apply it is, first of all, exposure work, meaning the daily grind of being with triggering sensations and actually doing things you're afraid of doing is mandatory. But also, really making that apply to your growth is mandatory too. It's not just about feeling feelings or responding to sensations differently. I think recovery is also about being able to answer the question, what have I learned and how have I changed? And I support that with my stress bucket metaphor. If you had a full stress bucket and that's what's led to chronic symptoms, something probably needs to change about how you live your life so that your stress bucket doesn't fill up again like it did. So I like for people to be able to give concrete examples of what they've learned and how they've changed and create action plans for change if they need help with that. So stay tuned. I actually have a video about recovery benchmarks and more provocative questions to ask yourself to help yourself create this kind of action plan. So be sure to subscribe so you're notified when it comes out. All right, so those are 6 things that I got wrong over the years. I'd love to hear what you learned from this video and maybe what you've gotten wrong about recovery and have learned differently since. Please put that in the comment section below and like, share, subscribe to the channel. These things really help me reach more people. Take care, everyone. Bye.